All right, so I'm gonna make a slab mug tonight. And I'm gonna start by showing you how I did this here with this chunk of clay over here. I put my slab sticks, which are a little bit fatter than a 1/4 inch, on either side. I'm gonna put my wire right on that tight and pull it through the piece of clay that I have pugged from my pug mill. The first one's always kind of waste, the second one might be too. It's not big enough for what we want. I'll use these for my tree projects. Getting closer. Alright, so this should be a good one. Finally, pressing down on those slab sticks so I get a nice even slab. And again, the reason why it's a cylinder is because I pug it in my pug mill at school. I'll put the rest of it away again. And then for these rounds, I did the same thing, but I just took it from the end instead of a long piece like this. So I'm going to set this off to the side because I don't need it. Just wanted to see how I got to that point. If you have wooden yardsticks at home, they're the thickness that you need. I like making it a little thicker to begin with because we're going to put texture into these. So I'm going to use the texture rollers or some lace that I have. Okay. I'm going to sit because it's easier for me that way. I'm going to move these out of the way. I cut these earlier, then I just covered them with a plastic. So plastic was laying on here nice and tight, firm. So some of the moisture got absorbed into my canvas board here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a metal rib, make sure it's clean. There's no chunks of clay on the edge that is going to cut into my clay. And then I'm just going to smooth out and clean off my clay. So I'm starting with a nice, fresh, clean piece. This has got some lines from the wire through it. So I'm going to press down just hard enough that it takes any of the canvas marks and wire marks out. And I can go in either direction. You can go in both directions too if you wish. I don't want to press too hard that it stretches my piece out. This piece that I have here, I was to grab my handy dandy ruler, is roughly 9.5 inches by 4 inches. 4 inches in height is like the perfect coffee mug type height. It's going to shrink a little in the kiln when it dries. So it's okay that it's a little wider than it needs to be. And in a minute here, I'm going to make it longer than I need it. And about 10 inches in length is what we're shooting for. So I have some lace over here that I have cut to about a foot, 12 inches there of a ruler. I also have this here. So I could decide that I want like maybe this in the middle. I'm going to center it the best I can here. Maybe these guys on the side. Or maybe I just want that going down the middle. I also have this lace here. So if I want a bigger piece and to leave maybe the top and bottom, it has nothing. This lace is much finer. These are more of like a thin yarn. This is more of like just a thread. So something to consider when you're picking your pieces. I'm going to use a rolling pin. Again, I want to make sure there's no clay left on from a previous project. I can also use a wooden dowel, which I often use. This one's kind of dirty from the last one, so we're just going to use a rolling pin right now. And I'm going to press lightly so that the lace doesn't really move and it's pressed into the clay. All right, now I'm going to press down a little firmer and allow that clay to be stretched a little, but not so much that it stretches a crazy amount. But just enough so it thins out a smidge. So when I get around to trimming up the excess here with my knife, I don't have any wobbly areas or areas that aren't straight. So I'm going to line it up with my lace. My lace is fairly straight. And bring it over here. I'm just going to trim off this excess. Hold your ruler down tight, the knife up against the edge of the ruler, and cut right into that. So now I have a nice flat edge. I want to do the same over here, this side. Little waste as possible. I can see through my ruler, so it's right lined up with the lace. Try to do this lefty. Just right up against the ruler, nice and slow. And then kind of cut it off here at the end. If I pull it through, it's actually going to make these corners not square. So I'm just going to hold on to those little scraps. I'm going to remove my ruler. All right. So I have these nice finished edges here. I can go ahead and remove my lace, and that texture has been rolled into my slab. You could go all the way to the end and have the whole thing covered if you choose. I'm going to pull it up off the board. All right, now you notice these ends are a little wonky. So we want to trim those up so they're nice and square. So I'm going to use my ruler again. Try not to have any waste. So I'm going right to the point, right at that edge, just cutting out that very little bit. Plop that over here. Be careful with my ruler marks. You see it just made a mark there. Try flipping it over. Right along the edge. Trying to make that 90-degree angle. Without that moving. Okay. See how it pushed out a little bit here? It helps if you keep your thumb kind of in place and cut against your thumb like a paring, and then that will keep that from pushing out. All right. At this point, I'm going to start rolling it into a circle. Clay wants to keep the memory that it has, so it's always going to try to bounce back flat. All right. So right now it's very much an oval, a smushed cylinder. Before I put that together, I have to score and slip it. So that means I'm going to take my serrated rib, or you could take a double-ended carving tool, or you could take, let me see if I can find one of my needle tools here, a needle tool, or if you have a little rake that has multiple on there, you can go ahead and scratch this end of the surface. Go kind of deep. You can go in multiple directions. Think hashtag. All right, now I'm going to come over and grab some slip. This one might be too watery. I'm not sure here. So slip is just chunks of clay and water. I like using my fingers sometimes, and sometimes I use a slip brush. So any kind of brush that's kind of an older brush. This one's got some clay already in it. Don't inhale the dust. It's not good for you. Clay dust can actually, over time, collect in your lungs, causing cancer. So if you are going to be working with any kind of dust, always wear a respirator. So if you're making your clay from dust form, and you're adding water and mixing it, pugging it like I do, you want to wear a respirator that is certified for those fine particles. Also smart to have something in your studio for air filtration or good ventilation. So now I only had to put the slip on the one side. I'm going to push and squish that together and kind of give it a little bit of a wiggle. Okay, and see, as I'm lifting up and trying to get more into that circular shape, it's going to try to pull apart on me. So I have to slowly keep pushing and squishing while I try to get it more to that round shape. See, it keeps opening, but I'm just going to keep pushing and squishing so that as I'm bringing that to the round coffee mug shape that I want, that will actually hold the shape. Now on the inside there, I could take a piece of this clay that I cut off and I can score it. So scratch it up, and I can scratch the inside of my surface here. And there's slip in there already, but if you need more, you could add more to it. So I could add some slip to this. And I'm going to go ahead and put it along that inside seam. That's going to help give me a little bit more protection from that seam ripping open. I can flip it over, make sure the seam's lined up over here on this side. Move that out of my way. I'm pushing that in. I'm trying not to get my fingers, like the lace, like too much pressure on the outside, because I want that lace to stay like it is. You can grab your wooden modeling knife, the wooden modeling tool. You notice it's curved on this end and it kind of has an indent here. Use the curved side is good for help to push that into place so that we can really smooth out that inside seam and make sure that it's one solid piece. And I'll go back through with a brush later too. I'm going to try to get it more to that round shape again. Notice it's still coming apart here. So I'm just going to keep pushing and squishing. Move some of that slip that is starting to dry, or some of that chunks. So I can push that together. And as this starts to harden a little bit more, then I can go ahead and try to pull this out again. Make it that round shape and still force that section together. So it's a lot of monkeying with it. It's a lot of pressing back and forth. I'm going to end up losing some of the texture on the side, so it's a perfect side to put the handle on, where that seam would be. You can make some decorative bit on the outside, so maybe you want it to look like a sweater and where the buttons would go. So I could put like, I could cut a slab and actually lay it on this whole part right here, maybe with some of that other texture, or just leave it, and then it would cover up and conceal this seam here. But it would still then look like part of the textured mug. So I go ahead and turn, and I'm pouncing a little bit just to help keep that round shape. Now it's really important when you first start, you cut everything just precisely enough so that this process is easy. If you don't have a square piece that is, 4 inches all on the entire thickness of your slab, you're going to have it where it's mismatched when you line up the edges. When you bring them together, they're not going to line up. So it's important to take time and make sure you have everything prepped just so. All right, going in here and I'm smoothing out that coil that I put in there. You can see it's taking off some of the clay. I can put that right back in my slip container here. You'll break down again. I'm using the whole edge of the knife to try to press that seam tight and smooth it out so I don't have any spots on the inside that's going to collect any dirt over time. So when you have a mug from the store, it's usually poured in some sort of a mold. And it's basically like a slip mold. So you don't have any imperfections on the inside. If you have imperfections on the inside of your mug, and you have, let's say you decide to use it for soup one day, and you put soup in there, if you can't get all of that stuff cleaned out over time, it's going to create like mold, and that would be very unhealthy for you. So you want to try to get that smoothed out as much as you possibly can, so you have that imperfections. And then the glaze will cover up the rest. So if you have any areas that didn't quite get it, the glaze will cover up the rest. As long as they're fine and not big thick holes. Like if I was to accidentally jab this in there, I'd want to cover that up with another piece of clay. All right. So you can still see the seam wants to open back up. It wants to flatten out. So I have to keep going back and forth and smushing it together. And at this point I am losing part of my texture that I had on there. I can try to go back on there with my lace and re-go over that spot, but if I don't have it lined up perfectly, it's going to look wonky anyway. So I would say come up with some other solution as far as how to cover up this edge and seam. And like I said, the perfect solution for that would be, that's where we're going to put our handle. All right, so I have a wet sponge here. I'm just cleaning off my fingers. You can also take the sponge, if you pinch it around the edge. I'm gonna get my Lazy Susan here. It's also called a banding wheel when it's powdery. I'm gonna pinch and turn. And I'm not pinching hard, I'm just enough so that the edge of the clay is no longer sharp, because we don't want anything sharp against our lips. So I can come with just my fingers, and if I have them wet, and do the same thing, just kind of rub them back and forth. Get rid of any imperfections, any rough spots. Round off that lip a little bit. You can pinch it a little bit more, like if you had your piece a little too thick. You can leave the body of it thicker, but it's not comfortable on your lip if this lip up here is too thick. So your lips on your body will not like the thick lip of the mug, or you'll end up with whatever you're drinking running down your chin. Thin this off a little bit there. There we go. There's a big blob from that piece that I put in there. See if I can get it to come off. Still in there. There we go. Smoothing that out. I'm actually going to take a little bit of that clay. There's a spot on the inside that I have some bumps on my canvas board. So when I rolled it out, it had a little thing underneath the canvas, like a nail or imperfection in the wood that ends up pushing through. I just found one in there, so I'm just covering it up, coming through here still with my fingers or my wet sponge, cleaning that edge up on the inside, on the outside. So it's smooth for my lips to touch. All right, so here we have it. We have my cylinder, which will be my mug, is shortly. There's my seam. You can see it still wants to come apart a little bit, but it's holding together. The inside is completely sealed off. Now what I want to do is, this guy here is my bottom. This is the one that I just smoothed off. So I'm going to grab one of my slabs. I'm going to prepare this. So just like before, I'm going to take my rib. I'm going to press down and clean off and prepare that piece. I can put lace on it if I want to. Of course, the lace would go on the bottom outside, not on the inside of your mug. Otherwise, you have the same problem as before with having any indents in there. You're going to have places where the food's going to get trapped. I'm going to flip it over. The other part about doing this is it actually compresses the clay and makes it stronger. So you don't have the clay cracking. All right, I'm going to check this side again, make sure it's still okay, and it is. I'm going to use this as my bottom outside. So I'm going to grab a piece of lace that I like to use because it's round. My daughter hates it because it looks like holes. All right, so I'm going to do this on the bottom. Use some sort of rolling pin here. I want it to stay round, so that's why I rotated it when I'm starting to push into the clay here. Part of this is going to get cut off, and you won't see it anyway. All right, I'm going to take the bottom off later, so I'm going to flip this upside down. I'm going to grab my banding wheel. I'm going to put a piece of newspaper down if I can find some. Otherwise the clay will stick to the banding wheel, and I don't want that. All right, I'm going to get this another quick smooth. Just make sure we have everything nice and clean. Little spot there. Okay, now I'm going to take my serrated rib again, or something to score. I'm going to scratch the bottom of my mug. So the bottom of the cylinder that I haven't really smoothed out yet. I'm going to go in numerous directions. And then I'm going to lay it on here real quick to see about where it's going to be. I'm going to take something and go around there so I know where the inside and the outside of the mug is. All right, now I can take this off. You'll notice I kind of have a donut there. That's where I need to do my scoring. I want to keep the scoring out of this section. I can do this whole part because it's going to get trimmed off. So I'm going to just take my serrated rib again. I'm just going to go right up to the inside edge circle line. I don't care about the outside edge because it's going to get trimmed off anyway. Okay, it's deep enough. I can go ahead and put some slip in there. Give her a good stir. I'm going to put a generous amount on because I want it to ooze out. My slip is kind of on the chunky side. That's cool. I use a blender usually. I don't have a blender here at home that I'm willing to use for clay, so I just kind of get it and mix it. It's a little on the chunky side, but that is okay because it'll all smooth out in the end. Okay. Don't want that chunk on the inside though. All right. So I have a lot of slip there. I'm just going to go ahead and that looks good. Now I'm just going to press down, get a little wiggle back and forth. We want that to be that circle. I'm going to pound it a little bit. And then I'm going to trim off the outside edge slowly. I don't want to cut into my piece. And it really does help to have this banding wheel. It's amazing. So I have not gone through the whole thing yet. And that's okay. So I'll go around a second time. I'm going to cut down here. And then I'm going to try to go down a little deeper this time. All right, that should be good. I'll take this excess off on the outside of my mug. And then I have to clean that up at the bottom. Just take my finger to start with and spin it around so that I'm sealing the bottom to the cylinder. Alright, so I started my finger. That's enough. I'm going to go ahead and lift it up. Remember, I still have this on there, so I can take that off now. There's my bottom. I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to use my metal rib, not the rounded side. I'm going to actually use the flat side. And I'm going to go right around carefully to help smooth out any imperfections, to really make that bottom secure and nice and clean. I'm going to take off any of these chunks of this top up here. Just going to pull those off, like if you're a cake. Ever watch those cake shows where they go back through and they cut off that frosting? Alright, I have a stamp with my initials on it, so I'm going to stamp my piece. Actually, I don't want it there. I'm going to stamp it on the inside. Okay, I'm going to stamp it when I put my handle on. Change my mind. I have to clean off that inside and make sure that seam is good. So I'm going to rinse off my brush with some water. I don't want any of the chunks of clay on there. I don't mind having some slip, but I don't want the chunks of clay. Just going to go around the inside seam. Make sure that's sealed off nicely. Rinse off my brush again. Clean it on my sponge. Check it again. Smooth that off down there. You don't want to have a lot of bristle marks. Okay. And there we have it. There's our cylinder with our texture from the lace. The bottom is smoothed together. It's on there. And now I just need to make a handle. The handles you can make in numerous ways. I'm going to cut off a chunk of this piece that I cut off earlier to show you guys how I make my slabs to start with. So this will just make life a little easier. In the potter world, when I'm on my wheel, I actually choose to pull handles. But that's for another video. Alright, get that out of the way. Now, this would be an awfully big handle. So, I'm going to take my fancy dancy cutter that I have here, and I'm going to drag right along the edge. This is cutting, I believe, at a 60-degree angle, if I remember correctly. I'm going to flip my handle over. also drag it through this side. This side's a 45 and this side's a 60. All right, I'll get my sponge wet. Rinse it out. I'm going to take it and I'm just going to smooth that handle down, those edges. I don't want them rough. I'm going to cut this guy here at about a 45. I could have used that, you know, right? I have that tool, but I didn't. All right. Now what I have to do is I have to score this end. And handles are better to put on when they're leather hard, after you've molded them over something. I'm not patient, so I did it this way. All right, so slip. I have to scratch where I'm going to place the handle. So over that seam. And then I'm going to do a little push and squish. All right. We'll adjust that later. I'm going to cut some of this off. It's going to help me with my angle better. Put the sponge under here. All right, push and squish. Push, push, push. All right, now the bottom of my handles, I like to do in a way, I look at the side profile to see if it's big enough for my hand or a couple fingers to go through, and to make sure the angle is what I want to see. And if it is, I want to go ahead This is better if it's all leather hard, but we don't want weight. I'm impatient. So I'm going to scratch down here at the bottom of this one. I'm going to scratch down here on this side. I'm going to throw some slip under there. I'm going to turn it this way again for myself so I can see that profile. And when I turn it this way, make sure my handle's straight. I'll push it up a little. Right there. All right, actually the whole length of the handle is good. So then I'm going to put my hand to the inside of my mug and I'm going to press down right there. Put a little indent. That's really going to be just a fun little decorative thing. And it ensures that your handle is squished on there good. Take my sponge and clean up my edge. Make sure I don't have any sharp edges. And this edge too. All right, now gravity is going to make this want to come down and change the direction of my handle. So what I learned in college, sit in your mug, change the shape of my mug, make sure it's round again, okay, on something. And because my handle is a little bit longer or taller than my mug, I have to hang it off the edge. And then I'm going to come in here with my paintbrush. I'm going to go in that seam and push that on there well. I'm going to clean up this seam a little bit later. I'm just going to add some more slip in there just so that I have a lot oozing around. And that's it. what I'll end up doing with my stamp is I'll usually put my stamp right where I put my thumbprint. Right here. I'll push my stamp into there. It has my signature on it. And then it's done. Thanks for watching.